Absence makes the heart grow fonder, but in MMA, it doesn't always make fighters come back stronger. Whether it's ring rust, a confidence thing, or simply biting off more than they can chew, things don't always play out as expected. Today, we'll be covering some of those moments in which long layoffs ultimately tarnished once phenomenal legacies. I'm Scott from Fight Game Insider, and this is 10 MMA returns that didn't go to plan. 1. Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes was the 205-pound golden boy until he suffered a brutal knockout loss in 2021 against Yuri Prochazka. It was his third straight defeat after losing to Jan Blachowicz and John Jones in back-to-back title fights. Reyes had previously won the first 12 fights of his career, going undefeated against Chris Weidman, Jared Cannonier, and Volkan Ozdemir. So his comeback at UFC 281 held a flavor of redemption and a chance to climb back up the light heavyweight division. Sadly for Reyes, his mission failed shortly after entering the octagon that Sunday evening. His opponent, Ryan Spann, was on point, jabbing Reyes with a sharp left and an overhand right. Reyes struggled to find his rhythm and would rush his offense, which ultimately led to him getting caught coming in and put to sleep on the canvas, making it his fourth consecutive loss. 2. Nick Diaz. Our second failed comeback was Nick Diaz's return against Robbie Lawler after a 6-year hiatus. And even though fans were excited for the bout, the fighter we saw step into the cage was a shell of the legend that once was. 3 days before the fight, he mentioned how he was resentful of MMA and wanted to pursue other passions in life. And it showed at UFC 266, his first appearance since fighting Anderson Silva in 2015. It was the third round when Diaz got put down, to which he accepted defeat and signaled to the ref he wanted no more. And that was the story of Diaz vs. Lawler Part 2, as Diaz had previously dominated him back in 2004. Did his performance drop due to a hiatus, or was this failed return due to a lack of motivation for MMA? Comment below what you guys think. 3. Walt Harris. Our number 3 is Walt Harris vs. Alistair Overeem. This loss, however, wasn't as significant as his personal one at the time, in which his 19-year-old stepdaughter was kidnapped and murdered. Anya Blanchard's SUV was abandoned in Montgomery, more than 90 kilometers from her last sighting location. Police also mentioned that the vehicle contained her blood, and later in November, her bones were found in a forest. Harris entered the octagon wearing a "Fighting for Anya" t-shirt and seemed determined as he dominated his opponent Alistair Overeem in the opening round. But Overeem overcame him in the second, using outstanding combinations followed by multiple strikes to a battered Harris. Finally, the referee intervened, setting in stone the outcome of his high-stakes return fight after a 6-month grieving period. But everyone, including UFC President Dana White, agreed that it was still a win to return to the octagon after the devastating events in his personal life. 4. Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell stood undefeated against Tito Ortiz in the octagon twice over, and he could have remained so had he not returned to the octagon after his retirement in 2010. But he decided to take up Ortiz through overconfidence, despite hanging up the gloves almost 8 years ago. The belt wouldn't last long, with Liddell being KO'd in the opening round. In his post-fight interview, the fighter said he didn't return for money or fame. Instead, he enjoyed fighting and being in the octagon. He also said he could have won again had he done some things differently. Considering he was well past his prime and had already suffered some nasty stoppage defeats, was his return to the octagon fueled by greed or passion? Let us know what you guys think. 5. Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor was at the peak of his career in 2016 when he went MIA from fighting. With the featherweight title already under his arm, he also snatched the lightweight title, becoming the first man to hold 2 UFC titles consecutively. But the champ vanished as quickly as he came after winning his second belt. And his time away had its consequences. McGregor lost both his titles due to inactivity while still retaining the respect of a champ. He even ventured into boxing, but lost against Floyd Mayweather Jr. Finally, the Irishman was ready to return to the octagon at UFC 229. Conor fans expected no less than a flawless victory when he prepared to exchange fists 2 years later against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Whilst hardcore fans knew with Nurmagomedov's grappling heavy style, this could be a long night at the office. McGregor started strong, but Khabib's grappling and wrestling skills were a constant threat. In the second round, Khabib dominated, knocking McGregor down and landing heavy punches. McGregor rallied in the third, and this became the only round of Khabib's career that he potentially lost. His grappling took center stage in the fourth as he used a neck crank to force the tap and hand McGregor a very sour defeat. With that loss, McGregor's championship days were well and truly over. 6. Luke Rockhold. The next disappointing comeback occurred at UFC 239 when Luke Rockhold was knocked out in the second round by Jan Blachowicz. Rockhold had been on hiatus for over a year after losing to Yoel Romero at UFC 221. Meanwhile, his opponent had been quietly active in the octagon. The fight was a fierce dance between the two fighters, and Blachowicz managed to put Rockhold on the mat by the end of the first round. But things really heated up in the second, when Blachowicz landed a swift left hook to end things once and for all, breaking his jaw in the process. 7. Alexander Gustafson. It took only a little more than a minute to destroy our next fighter's return. Gustafson was submitted in the first round at heavyweight, facing former champion Fabricio Verdum. The two-time title challenger suffered a 3-fight skid, including losses to John Jones and Anthony Smith. So Krylov was his ticket to redemption, as he looked for his first win since defeating Glover Teixeira in May 2017. But Krylov wasn't going to let him have it that easy. Within the first 10 seconds, the Russian charged straight at Gustafson and grounded him with a powerful overhand right. Gustafson tried to fight back, but Krylov was more determined to win than ever after losing to Paul Craig and Magomed Ankalaev. Krylov crowded him with heavy knees and a barrage of punches. Gustafson tried to escape the clinch by clinging on, but Krylov ultimately managed to free himself, finding a place to land a quick left uppercut. And so, Gustafson's return failed at the 107 mark of round 1 after multiple strikes, leaving the future of his career in limbo. 8. Peter Yan. Peter Yan was the untouchable king of the bantamweight division, but after one unfortunate fight with the Funk Master, Aljamain Sterling, his career path would change forever. The two fighters faced off for the first time at UFC 259, and stirred up controversy when Yan struck a fallen Aljo with an illegal knee. The knee in turn would give Aljamain the victory, making him the first person to ever win a title by disqualification. But the worst was yet to come in their rematch at UFC 273, where Yan succumbed to a split decision loss following heavy control time against him. This return opened the doors to Yan's poor fortune in the octagon when he suffered another split decision loss to surging contender Sean O'Malley at UFC 280, in which a lot of people thought he won. The 30-year-old Russian fighter had an impressive record with just one loss to Magomed Magomedov before the Sterling tragedy. His most recent performance coming against Merab Dvalishvili, where he was dominated from the opening bell. With only one win in his last 4 fights, the future for Yan is uncertain to say the least. 9. Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo was on an extremely impressive win streak, racking up some big names such as Dominic Cruz, TJ Dillashaw, and Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, as well as becoming a simultaneous 2-division champion. This was on top of his already shiny Olympic gold medal, which he never fails to let us know about. After retiring and sailing off into the sunset, Cejudo's thirst for competition and greatness became too strong. 3 years later, his return fight would be announced against current champ Aljamain Sterling. Sterling was pumped after proving he was the real winner of the fight against Yan after their rematch. Much like Conor McGregor, Cejudo also vanished from the octagon at the peak of his career, and at a reasonably young age. Despite being a very competitive fight, in which some people did think Henry won, it was Sterling who took home the bantamweight title at UFC 288 and added to his legacy. But Cejudo wasn't always on the receiving end of doomed returns. Next, we'll be diving into how he upset Dominic Cruz in his epic return to the octagon. 10. Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz had high expectations when he first entered the octagon as the first 135-pound champion who later became a 2-time bantamweight champion. But between severe injuries and cancelled bouts, His 4-year hiatus decremented his abilities, and just when fans were ready to see him rise again, Cruz faced Henry Cejudo at the co-main event at UFC 249. The Dominator Cruz had a fantastic chance to beat Triple C and become the first person to win 3 championships. Cejudo had a 5-fight winning streak at the time and was seemingly unbeatable, roasting fighters like TJ Dillashaw and Marlon Moraes. So the competition was expected to be tough. Sadly, Cruz's return didn't go as hoped when he was caught with a nasty knee and TKO'd in the second round. Are there any other failed returns worthy of mention? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon to be notified every time there's a new upload. And until next time, see ya.